What's up, party people? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. I believe this is the second or third interview today. I'm really excited about my next guest. His name is Oggie. He's been an AI data scientist before, it was sexy and all of us were talking about it. He ran Google Assistant Natural Language Processing Group, which is wild. He worked also at Grail, early cancer detection. And yeah, he just told me about some really interesting test that's available to anyone to be screened for over 80 some cancers. He also started Lind 3 years ago, and it's something that came out of the White House Cancer Research Accelerator. The silver lining kind of finding for him is finding interesting, unique applications for AI. Where obviously there's lots of big challenges in the world today, and he's tackling these challenges head on using AI. So, how you doing?
Doing well. Great to be with you.
Good. Yeah, you said you're in California?
Yes, in the San Francisco Bay Area.
San Francisco, one of my favorite places. So, yeah, I was going to ask you. So maybe just take us into the deep end. What is Lind AI? We can keep it short, maybe high level for now, but happy to kind of double click later on as well in the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Lind AI is the company I founded 3 years ago. It is a research platform for hospitals. We help qualify patients for clinical studies and help the research operations identify more opportunities and more treatment options for patients on the ground.
Interesting. And I guess, why are you building this? Again, we're going to go deeper into it, but I'm just super curious. Is there, I don't know, like a life event, or how did you land at this particular problem to solve?
Yeah, great question. So over the last 12 years or so in my life sciences experience, I ran a number of studies or was part of many research and clinical trials. And we've seen and observed a huge impediment to clinical research is qualifying and finding enough patients to test all the different therapeutics and interventions in the field. One of the biggest struggles there is just the amount of burdensome data discovery and workloads that these research nurses and the research staff at health systems have to do to make that possible. So we built a platform that really helps and enable those coordinators on the ground with doing 95% of the workload on their behalf.
Fascinating, interesting. One of my favorite things is to really track people's hero's journey, right? And so I was going to ask you something. So you said you mentioned earlier that you're Canadian. I also found out that you became a Waterloo computer engineer, and Waterloo has this reputation as Canada's builder factory, right? Can you take us back before all of that? Like, what did young Oggie want to be, and what were you obsessed with as a kid?
Yeah. I think I was always born to be an engineer. From early days, I was taking apart radios and soldering and working with breadboards and circuitry. So the engineering profession was kind of, I think, in the cards from the early days. It helped also to have two parents that were both engineers. And Waterloo holds a special place in my heart. It was a fantastic spring for my career and the trajectory that it's been on. I've met some wonderful classmates there, and it really sets you up for success in terms of the co-op program, the internships, the practical experience it provides in addition to the academic as well. So a near and dear place in my heart, and both Canada and Waterloo specifically.
So your name is Oggen, and you go by Oggie, right? So can you tell us about your family story and where you come from, and how that shaped the way you look at work and opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally born in Croatia, part of former Yugoslavia, before immigrating to Canada. And so I got to see early on in my childhood sort of a country where things didn't pan out, and you went through sort of this civil war, the breakup, working through adversity, working through kind of picking up yourself and your family and trying to sort of reestablish yourself in a new and foreign country at the time. So a lot of those lessons of determination, of perseverance, of hard effort, focus kind of stuck with me throughout my life.
Super interesting. Yeah, so I was gonna I was gonna also ask you, so like why Waterloo? Why computer engineering? And you said you were always an engineer. Like was there a moment in those like co-op years where 2001, 2005 when you realized software was going to be your life?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I had the privilege of interning at Google. I think I was interning there actually the day that it IPO'd was the day I started my internship. And there was a lot of great energy, a tremendous amount of brain talent at these companies. Um, I think three of the folks that I worked with had authored textbooks that we had used back at school. So these were really renowned, sort of industry-leading, formative folks. And I realized I wanted to be part of that. The excitement, I think the energy, the scale, the ambition to do something of impact and globally as well. Back then, it was organizing the world's information and some of the work on a lot of the consumer-facing products Google was building. But I found it incredibly fascinating, both as the impact side of and the sheer scale of the work and the opportunity, as well as the intellectual talent of being alongside some of these industry leaders to just keep learning from them.
You spent 13 years at Google,
Mhm.
starting with, I guess, Google Checkout, the payments platform. What did building payments infrastructure teach you about trust, risk, and money? I guess that a textbook could never do.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a fantastic experience of seeing a product go from 0 to 1 and being sort of my first foray into innovation. Even though it's within a company, you can still be an innovator and a builder. It doesn't have to require a startup. So that was a great experience in that regard of understanding the technology and how you build a service and the adoption curves. Payments themselves and the payment industry, I think we had uncovered and learned the hard way what it means to win over people's trust, and how to make a profitable or a sustainable business out of it, and also had to go through some hard learnings in terms of the fraud, abuse, and some of the not so desirable aspects of what it means to run a payment platform. And so hence my transition into a lot of the fraud and abuse and detection work that consumed a good number of years while I was at Google.
You also ran AdWords risk and integrity engineering for 7 years.
Mhm.
So that's a kind
Mhm.
of like a cat and mouse game against fraud at kind of planetary scale. What did fighting bad actors teach you about incentives and human behavior?
Yeah. That was a very uneasy years of my career with reporting to some of the executives in leadership and being responsible for protecting a lot of the Google's core business back at that time. Um, it was fascinating to see that in these marketplaces, it doesn't matter if it's an ad network, if it's for food delivery, for transportation, and ride sharing, it is essentially you're brokering trust. And it does not require a significant number of bad actors on that marketplace, on that network to erode that trust across the good users. And so um, even medium to low volume of fraud and issues could actually become outsized problems. And so it required a tremendous amount of attention. It required a tremendous amount of oversight, and never underestimating the adversaries who were also equally motivated to keep profiting and benefiting from whatever crimes and whatever abuse they were committing. We actually had to go through some of the learning curves also from a technology and AI standpoint, Today, there's a whole field of adversarial modeling where you assume there's an adversary, and the training data, the patterns you're seeing today, you assume will be changing, and you cannot overfit on those. We had to go through the learning curves back 15, 20 years ago in terms of what that meant and how to approach those problems before the adversarial field existed in AI.
So interesting. So a lot of engineers stay at Google forever, right? So from what I've heard, the golden handcuffs are real. So what was missing for you, and when did you first feel the pull towards something with higher stakes than ads?
Yeah. So my father went through a prolonged cancer battle, both with numerous procedures, clinical trials, and I had one of those moments where we all have to pause and think long and hard of what we want to do next. How can we make a difference? And so I felt compelled at that time to pivot my career into life sciences and bioinformatics. So I joined Grail, the early detection company that's focused on cancer detection, and was leading their data science team in AI development based on the cell-free DNA to help patients detect cancer early before it's symptomatic.
I was going to ask you about that, but before I do, I was going to say, looking back, how did the combination of payments, risk engineering, and machine learning at Google quietly prepare you to take on something as messy as healthcare?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of the techniques on the AI data science side carried over and translated quite well. I think my experience with fraud and abuse was actually quite an interesting preparation for the cancer detection, because in both cases, you're looking for the needle in the haystack. You're looking for very low frequency events. And so a lot of the modeling techniques, a lot of the challenges, a lot of the pitfalls of potentially overfitting or fitting on noise, a lot of those issues have been seen on both sides. And so, while the domain was completely different, obviously, and you need to learn biology on one versus payment infrastructure and e-commerce on the other, the modeling techniques were actually eerily similar in their challenges and the math and how you approach and how you break down that problem.
Mm-hmm. So you left, like you mentioned, Google for Grail, right? Working on early cancer detection from a blood draw. What pulled you into cancer specifically? You said it was your father's experience. Like, was there anything else going on as well? Had you been thinking about this line before that, or mostly that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it started with my father, I think, and realizing the patient's journeys and what access to cutting edge treatments would look like. Early detection when cancer can be hopefully operated on or potentially cured, as opposed to later stages. And realizing that vast majority of patients, similar to my father, wait until it's pretty evident and the cancer has progressed or is symptomatic, and sometimes it's too late. So that was the key driver. I think it so happens that when I looked at that field, I was able to find an opportunity where I also already knew some colleagues and former collaborators that were already at that company, as well as the ability for me to come in and actually apply my skill sets and my capabilities to help further that project and the research and the field.
So at Grail, you saw what happens when world-class engineering meets clinical data. So what was the biggest kind of aha moment from that experience about how broken or how fixable medicine's data problem really is?
Yeah. So we got to see a lot of different aspects. I think operationally, we got to see a similar experience to other life science companies of how hard it is to stand up and conduct studies. How many ideas in our departments would stay on the whiteboard because it's simply too expensive or too risky to run the studies and the medical research and test them out in the field. Hence why I started Lind to help lower those barriers and remove those. And then we also got to see a lot of the messiness of the clinical data, the patient's outcomes being mislabeled, contaminations of the samples that could potentially throw your modeling off, and understanding all the false negatives, false positives, understanding if they're true issues in your data sets and the training side, if there are problems that are in the lab as well. Biology is extremely noisy and messy itself. Already, we think about these diseases of lung cancer or breast cancer, but actually there's many subtypes and histological subtypes of these diseases as well. And biology doesn't always organize the way we've organized medicine. The other fascinating learning I took away was while medicine is organized by the tissue type, by organs, and they'll have specialists, the diseases are actually quite similar sometimes across diseases, but where maybe it's attacking the same epithelial cells of multiple different organs, and those cancers might look actually quite similar and confuse our models where they might have mispredictions of one cancer with another. It's not that it's hard to differentiate a gallbladder from a pancreatic organ. It's actually difficult to differentiate maybe those epithelial cells. And so those are the kinds of fascinating learnings that we got to see, and the types of challenges on both the data as well as operationally on what it means to conduct studies in the field.
And then you went on to co-found Better Omics, building, I guess, data infrastructure for life sciences. What did that chapter teach you about selling software into hospitals and research labs?
Yeah. So that came out of the Grail company, and with a number of executives, we co-founded Better Omics. The field in medicine is exploding in terms of data. And not just on the clinical side, there's DNA, transcriptomics, proteomics, imaging now in terms of pathology, radiology, and the size and sheer volume of data is becoming significant per patient. I think that data now translating it into deep insights about the patient, about their biology, about their immune system, about that specific disease. I think there's a tremendous amount of work in the multi-omics, multimodal space of being able to dissect that and map that to patient outcomes to recommend the treatment. So that's the platform that Better Omics had built in working with some of the leading health systems and leading sponsors and pharmaceutical companies. The learning there is really scientifically, that is a tremendously difficult platform to build and execute. And then selling into health systems, selling into sponsors, to pharma, is equally a challenge on the more go-to-market commercialization side. The reason being is that it is such a complex, difficult field. There's a lot of skepticism of things working. There's a lot of skepticism of any one platform being able to generally support all these different sources. So it was a good lesson for us in terms of not just technical and scientific, but you also require a good business examples as well to convince and bring your customers and get them excited on the product. And ultimately, this company was acquired last year by Apple Health as a platform that I think continues within that organization.
Cool. So, here's a number that jumped out from your research. Roughly 80% of clinical trials fail to meet enrollment timelines. When did you first understand that patient matching, not science, is the bottleneck killing trials?
Yeah, so that was something I learned while I was at Grail as we were running our small, mid, and large studies. Um, the uncomfortable fact is that the majority of studies out there run into some operational problems. While a lot of them do have scientific, efficacy or toxicity problems that are more on the biological issues of that specific molecule or intervention. There's a significant portion, as you said, that have operational challenges, and that can be leading all the way to the study shutting down due to lack of patient accrual, underperforming sites, health systems that do not enroll a single patient on study is pretty prevalent. It can also mean biased populations of patients. Quite often, these studies are stood up across dozens or 100+ health systems. Very few large academic institutions will accrue patients, which means that it's going to be a biased population of that region, often socioeconomically more advantaged population. And so what ends up happening is once those therapeutics are graduate and are approved, they will underperform in the general population because the study population was simply a biased, unrepresentative subset of the overall population. And so I think there's a lot of work in the field to get into more of the community-based practices. I think on the regulatory side, there's a big movement to help provide better access to clinical trials. That is easy said and hard to do. Platforms like Lind, we're looking to really partner with the health systems so that the bulk of that workload internally can be offset by an AI platform that's been validated and proven, and essentially is a virtual research nurse or research coordinator that can do a lot of that work for every single patient, irrespective of their insurance and irrespective of their background and their ability, and so that every single health system can provide a service and offer more choices and hopefully accrue more patients onto these studies.
Interesting. So can you walk me through the moment of Lind? Like, what was the conversation with your co-founder Pranav where you both said, "Okay, this is the company"?
Yeah. So this is our third company together. He was with me at Grail, and then we were together also at Betaromics. This was one of those moments where we were just discussing a lot of the different opportunities and directions and what next in our careers, both individual ones and potentially together. So we were evaluating and assessing a number of different paths. And while continuing to work on specific diagnostic tests or specific studies is very appealing, we saw this pattern that everyone in the industry has been struggling with these operational problems and challenges. The entire medical field is essentially moving at the speed of how quickly a nurse can qualify a patient for a research study using PDFs and searches and copy paste of unstructured text. And so we said, well, there has to be a better way. We have to help these research staff. We have to help these clinicians with the work that they're doing. And so it became, as we started honing in on this idea, it became pretty evident. This is where the next interesting field for both of us was. I think we both felt the significant impact that this can unlock, and not just for any one study or any one sponsor or health system, but really help hopefully with millions of patients and the entire industry of studies.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the company's called Lind, and James Lind ran what many consider the first controlled clinical trial, curing scurvy in 1747. So is that the story behind the name, and what does it say about your mission?
That's right. So we're named after James Lind, of the fame or infamy of discovering citrus as a treatment for scurvy. And that was really paying homage to the innovator in the medical field of what we know today as the modern clinical trials. He actually had 7 interventional arms and a control arm, sort of pretty similar to what you would see in the modern trial. Maybe not quite the patient consent that we would expect today, but I think the premise was there. And so with Lind, our focus is really to help accelerate and streamline that same idea that carries over hundreds of years later. I think due to human biology, there's just a tremendous amount of complexity of what it means to apply therapeutics and interventions and treatments. And so doing studies and doing them better and more efficiently is really paramount to accelerate clinical research. There's tremendous amounts of great interventions coming down the pipe. It's just so onerous, tedious, and cost-effective, and so error-prone in getting them through that quagmire. And so we started Lind with both paying homage to the foundational work of the industry and how the studies are conceived and the whole regulatory framework around them, and then being that accelerant for them on the ground as we partner with our hospital system partners.
Cool. So large language models arrived right as you guys were building, right? So how did the LLM wave change what was suddenly possible in reading, messy, unstructured medical records?
Yeah. So the medical records are very heterogeneous, not just across institutions. They actually have a tremendous amount of heterogeneity from one physician to another, or one department to another, obviously, and also being disease-centric. There's also differences in documentation and the style between academic centers versus in the community clinics, for example, as well. There are issues of sometimes under-documentation or the way the data is typically captured, as well as sometimes missingness of data. So being very, very careful of understanding the absence of evidence when you're building models versus evidence of absence, and understanding the statistical significance of how much evidence is needed for each fact, where is it coming from, looking for expected gaps, looking for unexpected gaps. So for example, if you see lab orders or procedure orders that get sent out, but you do not see the results, clearly there's a data gap issue. So before applying a lot of AI, whether it's LLMs and extracting data, it is actually paramount to understand how complete of a health record you're starting with. What are the actual workups missing? What are the notes? What genomic, lab, surgery, pathology reports might be absent from that record, and is that expected or not given the patient's journey? So we spend a lot of time actually on a lot of the pre-processing, normalization, harmonization of patient records, and understanding those gaps and what was seen or not seen for each patient before we try to make any assessment. And so that work is really sort of the foundational QC, because that gives you the confidence or lack thereof to make any sort of further clinical judgment and qualification for that patient. So the LLMs have enabled us to do a lot of this work of not just extracting facts, but actually to be able to thoughtfully QC these records as well.
Can you explain Lind to someone who's never been inside of a hospital? Like a patient gets diagnosed with cancer today, like what happens without Lind and what happens with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically, the typical workflow within a hospital would be when a patient is seeing a physician, and you've been diagnosed with a disease, or if you have recurrence or you've progressed and you're looking for the next line of treatment. Physician may think of a study for that patient. They might have a few in mind that they're aware of, or just read in a journal, or came back from a conference, or might send that request in to a nurse and to say if there is an opportunity to potentially consider this patient for any studies available at their institution. So it's fairly up to at the discretion of the clinician to first of all consider that patient for this study, and what studies they might even qualify for is really at this knowledge base of that clinician and what's in their mind. When we partner with health systems, we can actually help completely overhaul that process. So every patient coming in, and before they even step through that door for that encounter, we can pre-screen that patient automatically for all candidate trials available out there. And we can present that information as part of the appointment planning for that clinician and the research staff of all of the treatment options that are available to that patient, the ones that they might be eligible today, the ones that they might be watch listed for or eligible in case of progression or in case their disease advances. So it helps them actually equip the clinician with a lot more information proactively as they're entering that conversation with the patient, and they can then present and decide if there's one of those treatment options that are on the clinical trial side is a viable path forward, and have that meaningful discussion with the patient then. Today, about 4% of the patients are ever offered a study. We want to get that up to 100.
So your platform screens every patient against every open trial nightly inside the EHR with essentially zero extra work for coordinators. Why was zero added work a non-negotiable design principle?
Yeah. So the research teams are already overburdened. I think clinicians, research staff are already juggling many demands of taking care of the patients first and foremost. I think also on the documentation side, on labs, procedures, there's a tremendous amount of operational burden they have to do. So to maximize the utility of our platform, it was actually paramount that we actually were validated and as it could automate some of the hardest steps of the subtle lines of therapy assessments and the progression, being able to qualify patients based on complex temporal clinical criteria of these study protocols. And we were just on stage at ASCO, the largest oncology conference, a few weeks back, on stage presenting industry-leading results, where for the first time ever, we've demonstrated accuracy on par or better than research coordinators and clinicians on the ground. So we were very excited with those results. And we achieved that level, and that was our target, so that we do not have to require the clinicians or the research staffs to still have to carry a significant manual burden. They can simply be the experts reviewing the results and all the evidence. They do not have to do that qualification and spend their time still doing a lot of that manual discovery and very grungy manual work.
Wow. What surprised you the most in that validation work?
Yeah. So the incredible part of the as we started approaching sort of the expert level decisions, we actually encountered examples where some of the research staff started using our platform as a training tool, or realized that they had not been always applying those eligibility criteria or the clinical criteria consistently or to the full extent. And so sometimes we will hold a high bar for the AI and data science models and ML. But it's also important to know that the humans themselves are not perfect. I think there are a lot of gray areas, especially in the clinical setting, a lot of judgment or subjective types of areas. And so it was a great learning to see when even the experts or the research staff are actually learning from the platform. So that was a very rewarding moment. The other one was actually the way our platform works, we actually spent most of our time on the data quality and QC and heterogeneity, like I talked about before. But we also spent a lot of our time on actually interpretability. And so what we saw was a tremendous amount of resistance or nervousness around AI in healthcare. But when you actually peel back any decision-making system or recommendation system, and you show the work, or you show the evidence, and you show the clinical rationale, and it's no longer a black box, a lot of the experts are then put at ease because they understand how and why certain decisions were arrived at, what evidence was found in the patient's chart and record to sort of back up and support that decision. And so the adoption of AI, I think, is one where that needs that level of transparency, and we should not be treating it as black boxes. I think black boxes scare people because you've now relinquished control and understanding of it. I think when you spend the time to provide that transparency, it puts those experts at ease, so they still feel like they're in full control.
Interesting. So you guys just partnered with Advocate Health, right? The third largest health system in America. So what does it actually take for a seed stage startup to win an enterprise deal like that?
Yeah. It starts and ends with trust. Healthcare moves at the speed of trust. Trust in terms of that it's the right team. Trust in terms of how we think about the problem, the level of scientific rigor that we apply for ourselves internally and externally. Co-publications like the ASCO talk that I mentioned, and it took time and patience. Healthcare is not a field and not an industry that you want to move too quickly and break things. I think being systematic, principled, and finding phenomenal partners like Advocate that are looking for innovative companies like ours, and then where we can co-develop this technology thoughtfully together in a validated, proven way. So it took many things, many people, many conversations. It's been a wonderful partnership so far, and we've been very fortunate to have a wonderful partner in Advocate.
You guys have been very deliberate about clinician-guided AI, right? Supporting essentially human review rather than replacing it. Where do you draw the line on what AI should and shouldn't decide in medicine?
Yeah. So I think we're still a long way away from a standalone AI systems for a number of critical use cases. I think in the data quality, heterogeneity, there's outliers, there's all kinds of issues. I think having the experts in the loop, being the ones being informed, is the obvious logical step in that process. I think the bar is significantly higher for the AI to start acting on and start taking over the clinical decisions. And at that point, your software is a medical device regulatory landscape and hurdles that need to be overcome there. Our stance has been that there's a tremendous value that can be brought without having to go 100% there, and simply doing the bulk of this streamlining and automation and pre-packaging of all the evidence and pre-work, while still respecting the clinical expertise of that clinician, their knowledge of their patient, and knowing exactly the kinds of therapies they might be able to tolerate in their specific situations, and things that might not be documented in the chart and not that evident. So I think for our platform, I think we see partnering with clinicians and really empowering them as the way forward for the foreseeable future.
You recently raised, I think, $5.5 million from some notable investors, and you've been through Cancer X. So what's next for Lind, and what does the company look like in 5 years?
Yeah. So we've had an amazing run so far, both through the White House Cancer X. We've had wonderful collaborations with the National Cancer Institute, health system partners. We're going to continue growing. We have a wonderful pipeline of health system partners that are engaging and interested now that the platform's been validated, proven at scale in terms of accuracy and capability. We're going to keep delivering value for the health systems, for the patients, for the clinicians, and for the industry to be able to conduct efficient clinical trials. We've also started expanding internationally while we continue growing our US footprint. We're now also live in Asia and continue to expand there as well with some of the leading health systems. And be able to eventually cover the full global footprint so we can help across all regions for international studies, as well as moving beyond oncology. We started in cancer, all of our background has been there, but we've now moved into dermatology, into neurology, and now looking to continue expanding into other prominent disease areas as well.
So, okay, last one here, right? So if AI trial matching works at, let's say, a national scale, like how many lives change? Can you paint the picture of what clinical research looks like in 2035 if you guys win?
Yeah. Well, and I hope we win and many other players in this space win. I think the patients need more choice and more opportunities. I think we're not going to rest for as long as patients get put on standard of care therapies without ever having had a chance to be considered for, or at least had been assessed for trial opportunities, even if they don't end up on one. So we're going to keep working hard until that number of patients considered is 100%. I think clinical research today is just it's a tip of the iceberg of the demand of how many studies can and should be stood up. So as we reduce these barriers, as we accelerate studies, as we are able to get them to faster completion and conclusion and more automation, our hope is that actually more studies can be stood up. Not all of them need to be groundbreaking interventions. I think there are some on dosing, some on toxicity management, some that are observational studies as well. I think medical research has so far had some of the worst ROI in terms of the cost compared to the investment. And I think we want to fix that as well as get more medicines out there to the public. And I think this being the biggest impediment, I'm hoping by 2035 that this is behind us and that we can actually at least double, if not triple, the rate of innovation within the medical field.
That's so inspiring. Where do people learn more about you? Where do people learn more about Lind? And yeah, just maybe share that and we'll land the plane.
Yeah. Lynn.care is our website. Come see us. And hello@lynn.care is the email. Anytime if anyone's interested, happy to continue the conversation.
Awesome. We'll hang out for 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to bring this this stream to an end. I see we have quite a few people listening. Thank you all for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it as usual. Until next time, yeah. All right.